Joel Arnold with Foundation Baptist College. We're continuing work in elementary Greek, and we're today coming to the chapter on the future tense, or the future indicative verbs. So just to get our heads a little bit around this before we continue on with it, let's go back and review a bit what we've already done with verbs. We've already learned so far the present tense and the indicative tense verbs, imperfect tense verbs. Okay, these are both indicatives. Later on we'll learn other forms. But under the present and the indicative, we learned here the present active indicative, luo, lues, lue, luamen, lueta, luusi. The way we formed that was the use of the stem plus the primary active endings, that first set, oese, amen, usi. And if we wanted to do the middle or passive, both of those were formed the same way. It's stem plus connecting vowel plus the middle passive endings, and that comes out as luamai, lue, luetai, luamata, luesta, luantai. Okay, all of that was present indicatives. If we went on, we continued with the imperfect indicatives. And in the active side, this was the augment plus the stem plus a connecting vowel plus the ending. And that's the same actually for both of these. So for the imperfect active, we're just running down these. We start off with the augment, then the stem, and then here's our connecting vowel and our ending. Remember, our endings were nu, sigma, blank, min, te, nu. And so we end up with here eluan, eluesu, elue, eluamen, elueta, eluan. These two forms, you'll remember, are identical. It's one of the rare places in the verb system where they are that similar. Okay, if we go across the other side here, we end up with a similar pattern. Eluamen, eluu, elueta, eluamatha, eluesta, eluanta. And that's just based off of these endings, main sata, methasthenta. We follow the same pattern. Only exceptional bit here is eluu, that's the second person singular, and that is an unusual construction. That's the conversion of this sa, and it's going to be then turned into, depending on the particular tense, some exceptional spots. And that fits actually a pattern we saw back here with lue as the conversion of sai. So the second person singular in both of these middle passives is a bit exceptional. Okay, now here's the challenge I'll recognize of learning yet another tense. Are you prepared? Are you excited about working through and adding another to your knowledge base? Well, the good news is that it doesn't take much to do so. Luckily, as you continue to accumulate knowledge of Greek grammar and you work through these, now you're adding more of a base that to add an additional tense very often might just be a matter of plugging in a new piece. So let me show you what that looks like. If I'm comparing it, as I did before, or as we just talked about with the present, here I'm showing you the present tense chart. Now look just above it, and you'll look at the future tense chart. And I'm going to give you a second to make the comparisons, because I think it can be sometimes more memorable when we do so. Just take a second, even if you want to pause the video, compare between the two. I'm looking at future up above. This is the future. I'm looking at the present down below. Can you make the comparison of those two? And what can you observe is the defining difference between these two as we proceed? Okay, if you caught it, or if you want to pause the video and look for a second first, that's fine. The pattern that we pick up is that there is a sigma added right in this spot all the way down the paradigm. Okay? Otherwise, these two patterns are identical. When we learned the present, what we learned was that you need to add the stem plus primary active endings. In order to form the future, you just need to put in a sigma right in between the two. And so as we just proceed down, oese, ameneta, usi turns into luso, luses, luce, lusamen, luceta, lususi. Okay, as I said, you essentially already know this paradigm. You just need to add in the sigma. How would I do the future middle? Well, go across the future, and I'm going to put on the bottom, you've got here, this is the present middle passive. This is the future middle. Okay, do the same thing, just look across it. I think now that you know, it's a fairly straightforward pattern to work out. And the pattern that you're working out here is just what we did a moment ago. I'm taking the sigmas throughout, and that pattern of the sigmas added in this spot down through turns these from present middle passives into future middles. Now hold on that, because I called this future, our present middle passive. It can be either one. I'm only calling this future middle. And that is now a distinction, or something that we've not seen before with verbs, but here it is. There is a further difference with the future, that I have a separate form for the passive. Okay? Recall, with the present, I had the middle and the passive together, imperfect middle and passive word together. And so same form for both. You learn the one form. You have to distinguish as you read. In the case of the future, I actually have three separate forms. And it would be, of course, a natural thing to groan. But here, let me give you a little encouragement there. Take a look at, let's compare the future middle, this chart, from the future passive, this chart. Take a second and go ahead, do the art of discovery. Look down through, and what patterns are you picking up here that make these two patterns distinct? What's the difference? If, and again, you can pause the video to give yourself more time, but if you picked up that the pattern is this theta eta infix right here, that's your distinction. Theta eta throughout. Otherwise, the future passive is identical to the future middle. Okay, so these two are very much closely related forms, just a difference of that theta eta infix. And when you get all done with that, then the morphology of the future, meaning the forms that you need to learn in order to read, recognize, or even produce the future, are a lot easier. You don't have to learn a new set of endings. There's not a complex paradigm, not a lot of complex conversions here. You learn these basic infixes, pieces that we put inside the verb, and those pieces inside the verb will form the meaning. Let me talk for a second about a concept in linguistics called morphemes. So sometimes we might be tempted to say that the most basic unit of meaning in a language is the word. And we get into larger discussions here. You might do better to say the most basic unit of meaning is the phrase or the sentence, because just putting a word out there, green. Well, I haven't said anything, I've just brought up an idea. But I get what people are going for, and so this word green, or that set of sounds, great, it communicates a color. You can close your eyes now and you can envision green. There's meaning that got conveyed. Actually, I can push the other way, and we can go smaller than words down to the word here, and it's a linguistic term. The word is a morpheme. A morpheme is the idea of something, a piece or a sub-piece of a word that actually communicates information. Okay, so if I went, for instance, with, let's say I have several of these guys, and I'm going to say morphemes. That last bit, this little S right here in English, is itself a morpheme. It is a subunit of a word. And that subunit communicates something. In this case, I can put an S on most words. Truck, trucks. Hat, hats. Desk, desks. I put the S on it, and I've just turned it into a plural. So that S on the end of a word, that would be critical, and it has to be on the end of a noun, that's also critical, is a pluralizer. Let's take that word. This is fun. We can just keep it going. Pluralizer. You may never have heard the word pluralizer, but you know the morpheme or the subunit plural. That's just a familiar word. And you've also absorbed the idea of the izer morpheme, a verb ending, that affects the meaning of a verb, and pluralizer would be it turns something into a plural. Okay, so you can use now an additional morpheme, and you could do this with lots of different You could do this with lots of different words. I don't think this is valid, but if we were playing around and we did something like morphemeizer, computerizer, you could turn words that actually don't even make sense, or not even recognized words, and you could derive meaning in them. Okay, and this happens with all kinds of things. How about asynchronous? Asynchronous has a number of morphemes in it. Meaning not. Synchron, so it's going to tell you that actually synced, chron, time. It tells you it's an adjective. Every bit of this, every syllable is actually an individual morpheme in this case. Okay, you can actually break down words and end up with a lot of understanding of what the meaning is, even if you've never seen them. I introduced that here because one of the things I think you can do effectively with Greek is memorize a set of grammatical markers. And these grammatical markers are some of the pieces that we're starting to accumulate with verbs. I would strongly encourage you to memorize this list because now you can actually form some of your verb tenses with a lot less work. We've already picked up one of these, the epsilon augment. Remember with our imperfect forms we do eluon, lu, okay, put the epsilon on the front of it. And that augment we've learned can appear in different variations and forms and ways. But that basic epsilon augment pattern is a marker of the past time indicative. Okay, each word of that is important. Right now, everything you're learning is indicative, so indicative doesn't carry a whole lot of meaning for you, but eventually it will. And eventually, when you're going through, trying to sort through all the 12, 14, 18 different configurations of a verb that you might have available to you, to know that something is has an epsilon augment and immediately identify past time indicative really could save you a lot of trouble. By past time indicative, we're limiting it to either the imperfect or the aorist, one of those two tenses, and it means then it's not subjunctive, it's not a participle, it's not an infinitive, it's not one of those other forms. Well, that's a big help. So recognize that one as one we've already learned. Some of these are ones we have not yet learned, and you don't have to worry about them right now. Certainly, you could memorize them now if you cared to. But these two are the ones I'm going to focus in on. And I'm going to suggest here that sigma placed at a critical spot right there before the ending, after the stem, before the ending, or before the connecting vowel. A sigma is a sign of the future. For some reason, sign of the future sticks in my head, helped me when I was a student. A sign of the future then, when you are forming a future or when you're seeing that sigma in that spot, this is what you're looking at. Now, I have to go and put little caveats in there. Later, we're going to meet the subjunctives, the aorist subjunctives will have a sigma in a similar spot. So it's not that every sigma is always a sign of the future, and you have to still work through some things, but this is at least a significant pattern. And the theta eta is a sign of the passive. Now, I say it that way because we're going to meet the theta eta later in the aorist passive forms, and the theta eta infix, placed right there after the ending of the verb, or excuse me, after the stem of the verb before the ending, is going to be the sign of the passive. Do you remember what we did to form the future passive? Just so turns out, lucky us, that our future passive infix is theta eta sigma. The sign of the passive, the sign of the future, put them together, future passive's what I get. And if you go ahead and memorize it that way, and you've knocked out both of those two morphemes, or memorized both of those morphemes, now when you come to your tense formation with the futures and the future passives, you've saved yourself one more step, okay? Sigma is my sign of the future throughout. Theta eta sigma is my sign of the future passive throughout. There are some other permutations or details that happen with the future. I'll come back to those in a second, but just to break up our discussion a bit, I think it might be helpful to recognize or take a look at some spots where the future is really significant for our reading of the text. And in some of these places, the difference in the time marker it's theologically and even devotionally really important. Let's take a look at a couple of these. Here, Matthew 16:18, I've just cherry-picked some of the really big passages, but Jesus makes the comment, and I say to you that you are Peter, and upon this rock, Petra, you could probably recognize that. So he's making a pun, Petros, and upon this Petra, sometimes you get like petroglyphs or petrogram. So that's, even into our language, still a word for rock. Upon this rock, I will build my church. This is a word that you've probably heard preachers mention in sermons, ecclesia. I will build my church. You know your personal pronouns now, thanks to a previous lesson. And the gates of hell will not overcome, or will not be able to overcome it. Okay, the significance here is that both of these two verbs are future tenses. And what that's telling us then is, from the perspective of Jesus' speech at this point, at least a significant part of the church he regards as future. I would suggest, or it is my belief, that the church itself is future. It is to be established. We're going to see it in Acts 2. The church will be built. Okay, I don't want to overread the passage, but I do think this is an important passage. And later on, reflecting backwards on Acts 2, the apostles will say, this was at the beginning. So at the beginning of something, well, it's the establishment of the church. The fact that this is future then marks the church as a future work that Jesus will accomplish. And the fact that the gates of hell will not prevail or will not overcome it marks this also as a promise. It's a beautiful future promise. Here's another promise in that kind of vein. Jesus is speaking to the disciples, do not be troubled. I will go from you, and then I will return. And if I go and I prepare a place for you. Now you do see this future in here, or the sigma in here, I should say. Something else is going on here in this case. I'm not quite looking at a future here. This is actually a subjunctive, so it's deceiving. Hang on to that thought, we'll come back. I will come, or I am coming again, and I will take you to myself, in order that where I am, you also should be. This right here is a future. I will take. Now, I am coming is a present, probably has a bit of a future tense feel to it, and the ESV has represented that. So these tenses can be fluid. I am coming, kind of the soon I am coming. It's kind of an inevitable or an imminent feel. I'm coming. I'm on my way. And I will take you to myself. Okay, that future tense is significant as a promise. 1 Corinthians 15, verse 52, the resurrection is coming in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. Okay, you're picking up, you remember we studied prepositions, you're picking up some of that. In the last trumpet, or at the last trumpet, this could be interpreted. You've got that same, there's a preposition followed by a dative, eschate, it's an adjective here, but eschatology, you'll recognize it from that. For the trumpet will sound. Okay, now it's all packed into one verb. But for the trumpet blast happens. And the dead will be raised, incorruptible. Here you've got some morpheme stuff happening, aphthartoi. And that aphthartoi is telling you not corrupted. And we will be transformed. Okay, these are both futures. Here I'm picking up a future passive, right? The theta is actually folded into the gamma here, but we will be transformed. And here as well, theta, eta, sigma. This is a straight future. Okay, very significant exegetically as well. Philippians 1:6, and I have been persuaded of this same thing. I'm certain of this. Having been persuaded of this same thing would be better. That the one who initiated or began in you a good work will bring it to completion. So you can see some morpheme action here. We've talked about prepositions on the front of verbs. So I've got epi on the front of, if you've ever heard of the teleological argument, the idea that there's an end or a purpose. Well, it will bring it to completion, to the point of an ending, at the day of Christ Jesus. And this is then eschatologically focused, future-oriented, as a promise. God will perform his good work. It will be completed. Here, I'm not going to read the entire passage, but this is in Hebrews 8. And God's declaring his intentions in the new covenant. And I will write upon their hearts. And he will write his laws, my laws, in their minds. I will write them, and I will be to them a God, or for a God, and they will be to me for a people. I will be merciful to their iniquities. Down here, that's the end of that passage. But all of these promises of God's blessing through the new covenant, future-oriented when he wrote it in the Old Testament. Now, he was already doing some of these. We get into theology pretty quickly, don't we? God's new covenant work was proleptically. It was early given to his people that believed on him. So you read about this in Deuteronomy. People like David, they would already enjoy some of the benefits of the new covenant. And yet, there is this future component promise to it that we are enjoying. Finally, here's the last and grand future at the end of the story of Scripture. God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Death will not be. And this is a future form of Amy that we're about to learn. Death will not be any longer. There shall not be mourning nor crying, nor will there be any more pain, because there will not be yet pain, because the former things passed away. Okay, now this is a past tense. And that's the have passed away, it's done, not from our standpoint now, but it's kind of like they will have passed away. And these future tenses, just beautiful. Here's the Christian hope. I do think it's worth looking at some of these and acknowledging the Christian hope is something that we are very much waiting on, very much a future and anticipatory thing. Faith is not yet sight. And so each one of these futures, I think, can demonstrate further for us the richness of the Christian hope and the future orientation for the Christian hope. You just saw here a moment ago these futures. You see estai a couple of times. And so I need to talk about that for a moment, because one of the things we've also worked on with several of the tenses are the forms of ami. So we've picked up in previous discussions the present indicative of ami. Ami este as men este ac. Present. Imperfect indicative, amen es ein, amen ete eson. If that's not already clear in your mind, go back, get those reviewed. You want to know these forms. These are the is forms for the is verbs. So you're going to see that a lot, and we just saw it there. Okay, well, here's the future. Esamai, esse, estai, esamatha, essesta, esantai. And the nice thing about this one, ami is a very much a variable verb. It's very inconsistent. But in this case, you can actually just use the stem s, stick on the primary middle passive endings, maisaitai, methaslentai, with your connecting vowels, and you've got the chart. Okay, and the exception to that would be right here. What would technically, or what you would expect to be essetai, has just gone to estai. Otherwise, I'm just looking at the endings I've already learned previously with the stem s. Okay, and that's my form of the ami verb for the future. Again, morphologically speaking, the future makes my life a lot easier. I have a lot less trouble to deal with. Let me do talk about, though, there are some combinations that happen at times. And I think you can grasp why this would happen, or why this could potentially be a bit of a conflict. In the case of, let's say, like some of the forms that we've picked up here as our key form. When we've talked about here, luso, well, that's easy enough. I stick in the sigma in between. Okay, and so I've got my stem lu plus sigma. There's not really much of a conflict going on there, or a problem, a clash that's going to happen. But what if I had, for instance, a verb like graph? And then I want to stick onto graph a sigma. And I'm going to end up with something like grapho. Okay, now, I'm not a native Greek speaker, and so we're not really that great on decisions about what's hard or easy to say. Every language has their forms that they find difficult. But you can see grapho. What if that, can you not just see, as lazy humans do their thing, that we might just end up turning that into grapso? I mean, it sort of kind of makes sense, actually. That's exactly what happened. The future form of grapho is grapso. Similar things would happen with a verb, let's say, peitho. Okay, so to persuade or to trust. Well, if I take peitho and I put on here peitho, can you not see that's a little hard? Peitho, the combination of those two consonants, it's going to end up being a little problematic. How's this going to work out? And languages aren't like planned. There's no central planning committee for a language. So what happens with these things is just that, well, as humans, like I said, are lazy, then they end up using verbs a certain way. We have similar things that happen to us in English. So this is called stem change. And so certain verbs, as they're combined, the way that tense is going to work out is going to be a changed form, a changed stem. So in English, the present tense leave, I leave, goes to past. It'll turn in, instead of I leaved, might be something that a 2 or 3-year-old might try. And mom's going to say, no, I left. This is absolutely one I've heard 2 and 3-year-olds say. I sleep, and then they'll say, I sleeped. Very common. Well, what happened with that? Eventually, these English speakers, I sleeped, is somehow it's easier to just say I slept. I seek, I sought, I bring, I brought. There are a bunch of these verbs that don't follow the standard English pattern of like I preach, I preached, put on the ed. They just don't. And it's because of the combination of, well, history, but also just how some of those sounds get put together. Okay, Greek does something similar. And the pattern now with Greek is that I'm going to have a set of different combinations that are going to make this a little unusual, just different ways of doing it, that I will have to combine or pay attention to the combination of consonants in order to put the sigma in and see how the parts fit together. Let me show you how that works. Here's a moderately intimidating chart, and you would need to memorize the information here. The good news is I think there are some conceptual things that can make this chart go down really easily. Okay, for starters, I'm not going to work with you really at all for this lesson on this line right here. The liquid future is something that we'll come back to in lesson 13. So you can leave that for now. The basic pattern of the liquid future is that we have these letters when a stem ends in those, as in minnow. Okay, so lambda, mu, nu, rho. You will want to memorize those letters eventually. I like to use the mnemonic leminer, like lemonade that's really strong. It's more leminer. If you have one of those letters, then you sometimes will change the stem. Sometimes the sigma just disappears. And so minnow, present, goes to future, minnow. The accent mark moved, that's it. Okay? And so generally what I teach students is a circumflex is one of your biggest clues. If you encounter a circumflex, no guarantees, but it's a decent possibility that you're looking at a liquid future. That said, you don't even need to worry about that for now. You can just ignore it for now because that's coming up in the future. What I do need you to pay attention to would be these other variations, one of which you've already encountered, the contract verb right here. The contract verb is that set of verbs like agapao, or poieo, or plerao. It's the verbs that have at the end of their stem in this spot right here, as in timao, okay, I have a vowel. It's always going to be either alpha, epsilon, or omicron. Okay, plerao, plera, remember that. Okay, phileo, agapao. And one of the things we said there, and this is old information, so actually you don't even need to memorize anything new if you remember what we did there. We said that if a contract vowel, the alpha in this case, is not in contact with another vowel, there's nothing to contract with, it will lengthen. The lengthening regime that we talked about is that we said that epsilons will lengthen to etas, alpha will also lengthen to etas, and omicrons will lengthen to omegas. Okay, so what you're doing here is exactly that. The timao, alpha, lengthens across to an eta, and we're done. Okay, in the case then of a contract verb future tense, the significance here is that where normally a typical contract verb would do this, and we would combine timao, or we would do tim plus epsilon iota, and we would do these combinations. We would end up with an alpha iota subscript. Where normally I have that, once I'm doing a future tense and I put in tima, I put in my sigma, that sigma has now blocked or put a barrier between everything and the endings. And that leaves this contract vowel by itself. Because it's by itself, it'll simply lengthen. Nothing else special happens. Okay, that bit of it works. So it turns out that even this line right here, the contract verb line, doesn't have to create too much headache. You've technically already learned that. Just a bit of review here right now. These top three are the ones that you are going to have to get into your head. But even here, I can help you out. Rather than having to memorize each one of these letters as just kind of, I don't know, raw letters, it's actually really helpful to pay attention to this category over here. And the category is, I maybe shouldn't say verb category, we could just say the letter category. But the category is for verbs that end in one of these four letters. So you can see peitho right here, it's an example. We're talking about the verb stem. And if this verb stem ends in tau, delta, theta, or zeta, then I'm in this category. Okay, now the thing that makes these dentals is they're actually linguistic categories, and they have to do with the way humans form sounds. Dentals, as in you went to your dentist, are sounds that are formed with your teeth, generally your tongue against your teeth. Ta, okay, I put my tongue on my upper teeth. Ta, da, tha, za. And in each one of those, actually a double sigma could go under here as well. In each one of those, then that combination is a form or a sound formed by my teeth that is also connected to this sigma, which is also a dental. S. Most people, anyway, form the s sound with their teeth, their tongue against the back of generally their lower teeth. And the combination of two dentals just renders a single dental. Or actually, that's what's represented here, the future form, the final form. So if I put this out into my forms that are, like I'm going to form my future, my theoretical future tense, peith plus sigma, okay, what we're discussing is this bit right here. And we're saying that this is a dental, the theta is a dental. A theta plus sigma is going to render this form right here. And so your peitho future tense is actually peso. The theta was elided or combined with the sigma, and I was just left with the sigma. Okay, so you do have to remember ta, da, tha, za, but you can actually just remember those as the dentals. At this point, I have them memorized, but when I learned these, I just thought about, okay, does the ending sound, is it formed by using my teeth? Okay, so is s. And so it just turns into s, peso. Okay, the palatal or velar sounds are sounds that you're forming back in your mouth. Okay, so if you do want something like a gargle sound, okay, back there. You're doing that with ka, ga, k. Each one of those, it's the back of your tongue up against the roof of your mouth. And that sound, that k, 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 you can hear a k plus s, if I combine those, would be ks. What you're actually doing with a ksi is you're starting out with a palatal sound and you're turning that into an s. So it starts, if I'll slow down an ksi sound, it would sound like ksi, ksi. I'm combining the two. Okay, well those sounds, the k, g, k, combined with sigma will produce xi. And so in my forms, something like dioko, when combined with the future, now I'm looking at the future form here, is going to be dioxo. It makes sense. I'm doing the palatals plus a sigma. X, dioxo. Okay, my last set are the labials. Labials are lips. And so the sounds that we form in Greek with our lips would be p, 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 lips, b. Difference between p and b is I just engaged my voice. And f. Now, technically, the f is something I do with my lips against my teeth. But it still involves the lips. P, b, f. Combined with a s, you can see how p, s, p, s would come out as psi. That's exactly what a psi is doing. It's a labial plus a sigma, sibilant. Put those two together, psi, and so in forms like grapho, the future tense will be grapso. All right, you do then want to know these well enough. I'm just maintaining, I think it's true, that you can do just fine using these as just the sounds, or knowing the sounds, t, d, th, zs, dentals, palatals, labials. And I think enough of this is intuitive. I, as a student, never bothered really memorizing this chart per se. I just kind of intuited it or got the concept of it. And after that, I was always able to more or less figure it out. Okay, the last thing I want to highlight for you goes back to this pattern that we observed with our future forms. The fact that the presence, or everything that we had done at any point previously, had always had the middle and the passive together. Right, so the present tense and the imperfects had this form, luamai, which could either be a middle or a passive. And if we compare that with this in the future, I've split, or I've exploded the middle and the passive. Now I have two separate charts for the middle and the passive. And it is just a good time to introduce, or maybe even to review, a concept that came up far earlier in a previous lesson. If you go all the way back to page 34, page 34, there's this set of vocabulary items. And the vocabulary items for these are a little unique as verbs, where a verb for us typically sounded like grapho, luo, agero, akuo. Here's a set of verbs. I'm just going to read them. You hear them and tell me what the difference is. So here's a verb that means I answer or I reply, apokrinomai. Here's a verb, genomai. I become, I come, exist, I am born. Erkamai, peruamai. Okay, hear them again, apokrinomai, genomai, erkamai, peruamai. They stand out because each one of these ends in the amai. And if you pause for a second and think about the amai ending, you've heard that. You know amai endings because, well, that's the present, middle, passive. So where most of the verbs you encounter them as this form, luo, akuo, agero. These other forms, I'm encountering them as this form, apokrinomai, genomai, erkamai. Why the change? And this is a specific set of verbs that occur only in those middle or passive forms. The reason we do that is because erkamai, you won't find an erko form. It doesn't exist. It doesn't happen. Okay, now this is because as the language progressed, that the middle was changing, and there's a little bit of a transition happening even in the New Testament about the function of the middle. And so some of these verbs are starting out with a middle sense, but eventually a lot of that middle sense is getting eroded. Okay, it would be an exegetical fallacy to look at a verb like erkamai and identify it as middle, which it is, and make a point about, aha, someone is going for themselves. A lot of that meaning it's pretty much been eroded. I mean, technically some could still be there, but it's pretty much eroded. Some older grammarians refer to this as deponent. You may see this in books. But the concept essentially goes that verbs that you learn in your vocab section with an "-my" ending, just understand or recognize them as being technically middle, but the force or the meaning is going to be fairly close to an active, very close to an active, very similar to an active. Okay, and technically it's not quite. There's always a little bit of a middle sense, most likely, and this is an active area of research for grammarians today. But for your purposes as a first-year student, think of it as an active verb. Okay, so I don't translate apokrinomai as I answer for myself. It's really kind of more the sense of I answer, and I'm the one doing it, I'm the one giving it, and so there is some of that sense there. Genomai, there's not really anything special going on here. I become, I exist. Erkamai, I come, I go. Peruamai, I go, I travel. And all of that then, I think, does relate. It comes up now in respect to the future tense, because for the first time in the future tense, we have a tense that actually distinguishes out the middle from the passive forms. Okay, as you work then with a verb in that category, something that ended in amai in your vocabulary sheet, just go ahead and translate that essentially as an active, with the awareness in the back of your mind that there is a little bit of a middle sense, but one that has been mostly washed out through the process of just the language change. And that's the future tense. It's another powerful piece that you've added into your knowledge to be able to use this and be able to function with the future tense. And you've got now the opportunity to continue to grow in using these. Take a look at Plummer's discussion on page 108 and 109. He talks about the predictive future, kind of I will go to the store, the imperatival future, the concept your mom said, no, you will clean your room. It's a command. And so it might be voiced as a future, but she's telling you to do it. And the deliberative future, that's the kind of sense, well, will I go to the store? Or shall I do this thing? Will I do this thing? Kind of still deliberating, working it out. All of those are meanings that you'll encounter in the New Testament. For now, I think generally you translate it as a future tense, and your English brain will take care of most of the rest of that discussion, and you're ready to go. Yet another tool for you to use as you continue in your understanding of this language.